Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday afternoon. The National Society of Black Engineers, NSBE at UCLA, would like to acknowledge our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino and Tongva peoples. So thank you all again for joining us today. My name is Imani Elston, and this is the Black Students in Engineering Town Hall, where we will be having a discussion with Dean Murphy and the UCLA Samueli leadership. Thank you again for joining us. So to start us off, I'm going to go over a little bit of housekeeping. As you can already tell, we're in a Zoom webinar. Only panelists will be able to have audio and video capabilities. And at this time, I'm going to ask that all panelists please turn off your camera and microphone unless it's your turn to speak or you're asked a question, just for recording purposes. As all of you can tell, there is a Q&A function, so all panelists will be able to see the questions. Questions can be asked anonymously by attendees. And then lastly, the chat feature for this webinar is disabled for attendees, so if you'd like to communicate with the panelists, please do so through the Q&A section. We'll have a specific time that we go over that. Alrighty, and then to go through our agenda, right now we're doing the town hall overview. Then we'll go through some student introductions and reflections from some of the Black student leaders. We'll then hear from Dean Murphy and the UCLA Samueli leadership about their plan. Next, we'll go into a review of the action items that were sent in a letter to Samueli leadership on Juneteenth, this past June 19th, which I will link in the chat. Then we will have an open Q&A, so all of the questions that are asked throughout the session will be answered during that portion only. And then we'll close out with some closing remarks. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Sydney Austin.
Thank you, Imani. We'd like to begin by thanking the Samueli leadership team, including Dean Murphy, Dean Brandenburg, and the engineering department chairs for being present today to discuss how to improve diversity within the School of Engineering. With that being said, we would like to give context when it comes to the underrepresentation of Black engineering students and faculty in the Samueli Engineering School. As seen in this table, we have compiled publicly available UCLA demographic data from the 2018-19 school year. This data comes from the American Society for Engineering Education, or ASEE. As shown, only 32 of the 3,924 undergraduate students in UCLA Samueli are identified as Black. That is just 1% of the entire undergraduate population. This trend continues through the master's and doctoral programs. And overall, Black students represent only 0.8% of the total UCLA Samueli community. Moving forward, these numbers have been broken down by each department within the undergraduate, master's, and doctoral programs. At the undergraduate level, Black students make up less than 3% of each department. At the master's level, Black students make up less than 7% of each department, and there are multiple departments where Black same in the doctoral program as well. Finally, we look at the faculty demographics for UCLA Samueli. As shown here, only 2 faculty are identified as Black within the 151 tenure track faculty. This is just 1% of the tenure track faculty, and it is worth noting that both of these faculty members are in the Civil and Environmental Engineering department. All other departments are underrepresented when it comes to Black faculty. And in the interest of time, I will not go further into all of these tables. However, I will make these tables available to all attendees and panelists that are here today. At this time, we will move on to the student reflections.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Catherine Douglas, and I am representing the Center for Excellence in Engineering and Diversity. At this time, we would like to invite some of our student leaders to share with you their experiences in the Samueli School of Engineering. At this time, please welcome Imani Elston.
Good evening, everyone. I am Imani Elston. I recently graduated with my bachelor's degree in civil and environmental engineering and am now an incoming master's student in the civil and environmental engineering department here at UCLA. In my few minutes to share, I wanted to start off by saying that we, as Black engineering students, have to be really brave to share our personal experiences in spaces like this. In working with the Black engineering community to find peers that would be willing to share their experience, I came across a repetitive fear of misrepresenting the Black community. For too long in our greater society, Black people have been seen as a monolith. And within UCLA Samueli, where we are one of few, if not the only Black student in our classes, that fear of being the representative is amplified. Our stories are unique, but share similar threads that stem from the color of our skin and others' cultural perceptions of Black people. On top of the typical engineering work that we're supposed to do in our courses, we are often called upon to describe or point out the inequities we experience, despite not being in a position of power to single-handedly remedy those inequalities. These are our life experiences that we are sharing today, and the majority of the time, we are not given the space or opportunity to share those truths. I bring up these sentiments today during my allotted speaking time because I really believe that there needs to be a change. George Floyd's murder sparked national outrage at the end of May. If we're being honest, he is not the first unarmed Black person to be killed at the hands of police, and he has not been the last, as we've seen in the last few months. Following his death, we received statements from the greater UCLA community as well as the Samueli community. But in my opinion, statements of solidarity do as much good as the thoughts and prayers statement does in other situations, especially if it is not followed by immediate action. My hope is that this conversation today can be the starting point to begin to address the needs of current Black engineering students. I'm excited about the opportunity to collaborate and to begin to come up with concrete ways and steps to retain our current population of Black students and increase our numbers so that we are no longer less than 1% of the entire UCLA Samueli student body. Thank you.
Thank you, Imani, for sharing your experiences. Really do appreciate it. At this time, Matthew McIntosh will share his experience.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Matthew McIntosh. I am a incoming third year PhD student here at UCLA. Speaking as someone who has left academia previously and gone to the workforce, I believe it is important that we address these issues of systematic racism and injustice early before it is allowed to propagate further into the workplace and society as a whole. We all know the stereotypes that engineering has been referred to previously as a boys' club where homogeny runs rampant. I am here today, along with my other colleagues who, as Black engineers, wish to change that. Having completed my previous 2 degrees at predominantly white institutions, I feel like I had already had a handle on what to expect coming to another one in UCLA. It would be simple. Just find your tribe, be it in engineering, business, or the arts, and do your best to thrive and survive until you completed your degree and moved on. However, that was not the case. I felt a similar sense of longing for a community for my peers within the sciences as others did in their respective fields. But what I had found instead was shocking. To be demonized and considered an afterthought by your own peers in engineering is reprehensible at best and outright despicable at its worst. Nobody shouldn't be faced with consequences when around the engineering buildings or the engineering community as a whole on the fact that they look like they belong, or that they are lost, or they are simply looking for trouble or a quick come up. Previously, I had made it my duty to try to bring together as many Black students within engineering as I could, so we could have a sense of community, no matter how small the community itself actually was. However, at the end of the day, even for myself, this is a near impossible task to do at an institution that had never had the best intentions for people who look like me at heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, for sharing. At this time, we would like to ask Sydney Austin to share her thoughts.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sydney Austin, and I recently graduated with my Bachelor's of Science from the UCLA Mechanical Engineering Department. In my time at UCLA, I have been an active member of the National Society of Black Engineers and even served as president during my 4th year. Therefore, I have spent a majority of my undergraduate career devoted to diversity and inclusion initiatives within UCLA Samweli. Today, I hope to create results that move beyond performative statements and actions. I bring this up because I have had many experiences within the UCLA Samweli community that have shown me we are not yet addressing racism and prejudice effectively. For example, in my 3rd year, I had a professor who emphasized the diversity statement on his syllabus during the first day of lecture. This professor stressed that he wanted to provide a supportive and safe environment for all who felt disenfranchised or underrepresented. This was powerful for me because it was the first time an engineering professor had ever said something like this, and I felt comforted. I attended his office hours at the very first chance I could get. One other student was in those office hours with me. They were Chinese and had come from China to study at UCLA Samweli. The reason I point this out is because the professor spent at least an hour of the allotted hour and a half talking with this student about how much he loved Chinese culture and enjoyed visiting China. And while I do agree that the Chinese culture is rich and beautiful, I was struck by how differently the professor treated me and this student. He answered all of the other students' questions thoroughly and with respect. But when it became my turn to speak, I was told that if I had such a basic question, I should drop the class because I was not performing at the proper level. Thankfully, I didn't drop the class and in fact received an A because I knew what I was doing and I knew that I understood the concepts. Furthermore, I know that the questions I asked in office hours that day was at the same level as the student that was there with me. Obviously, this experience was confusing and hurtful to me. This professor had championed diversity, yet disrespected and embarrassed me, the only Black student in the class, in front of another student within the very first week of class. I can only assume that the professor valued the other students' time and questions more than mine because he valued that other student's culture more than mine. And while I would be bold in making this assumption normally, if it weren't for the fact that this professor spent so much time praising a culture that did not belong to me. And this was one of the only noticeable differences between me and that other student. This is a clear example of being performative when it comes to diversity. The professor's words did not match his actions. He did not make me feel supported, and instead his statements isolated me further from my peers because I became convinced that my classmates would find my questions and thoughts stupid as well. I'm not sure this professor was aware of his own bias or the effect his words would have on me, because such a lack of awareness runs throughout the entire Samweli community. For example, when I took the undergraduate engineering ethics course, I was again disheartened when us students took a poll asking if the diversity on the Samweli campus was acceptable. A majority of students in the class voted yes, the engineering school was very diverse. And when the poll got more specific and asked if there were enough Black, Latino, and Native American students on the campus, a majority of students again said yes. And as one of only 3 Black students in that nearly 200-person lecture hall, I was frustrated and saddened. These poll results, taken against the demographics shown at the beginning of this town hall, show how blissfully unaware many students are when it comes to the underrepresentation of Black engineering students. And I do not feel the ethics class effectively addressed this lack of awareness. Thankfully, there has been more momentum to have these conversations and hear the voices of underrepresented peoples. I have seen and been a part of creating programs like the Awareness to Action training developed by the Women in Engineering Department that address racism, implicit bias, and microaggressions. Therefore, I would like to see this training become part of the engineering curriculum because it goes beyond improving diversity relations. Honestly, these programs make better engineers because engineers that can work in diverse groups and think empathetically about their consumers are better engineers and frankly, better leaders. And UCLA Samweli has a really unique opportunity to elevate the mindset of their students. All of us students here today have taken the time to organize this public forum and capitalize on the national momentum to create real and effective change. Therefore, I thank everyone who has taken the time to be here and listen, and I hope that at the end of today's meeting, we will end with real and concrete actions for moving forward.
Thank you, Sydney, for sharing. Now we will hear from Alexander Johnson.
Yo, what's up? My name is AJ, and I'm a PhD student in electrical and computer engineering here. So let me tell you how I almost got kicked out of engineering because of an entry-level weed-out class in my undergrad. So in this class, I could program and do math as well as anyone else. But the problem was that they gave us way too much work for any one person to do. Like every week we had like problem sets, projects, midterms, pop quizzes, everything. And the only way you could succeed in this class is if you got a big group together and you said, okay, you're gonna work on the project, you're gonna work on the problem set, we're gonna split the work so we can manage this. But the problem for me was that everyone always grouped together by how they looked. Like all the Chinese students getting in one group, all the white students getting in one group. So if you were the only woman in the class, the only Black person in the class, the only international student in the class, you're kind of screwed. Like you could not do all of the work given to you, and you just had to accept that you were going to lose points every week. So I thought, if it doesn't matter how good I actually am, I'm just going to be unfairly penalized because there are no other Black people in this class for me to work with. What's the point of me being an engineer? I'm just going to keep getting low grades and have no GPA to show for my work at the end of this. But I struggled through it, and then I came to grad school. But now as a TA, I see students come to me with the exact same problem, saying I'm the only Hispanic person, the only gay person, the only woman, the only Black person in this class, and I can't succeed because of it. And still, there's no resources here. The best I can tell them is try your hardest. Hopefully you can pass. And I just feel like I've failed as an educator if I've set up the kind of classroom where some people can't succeed from the beginning. And I'm here because I hope that other people feel the same way and are willing to do something about it.
Thank you for sharing, AJ. Now we will hear from Ike Okorafor.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm a rising third-year PhD student in the chemical engineering department. Fortunately, unlike AJ, during my undergraduate career at Stanford University, my chemical engineering class had a total of about 26 people, and 6 of us were Black. So I never felt out of place or like I did not belong. In fact, my roommate for 3 years was a fellow Black chemical engineering student. I realized that I was very fortunate during my time there, and that could have been a great overrepresentation compared to other universities. But at the same time, I was generally surprised to find out when I arrived here at UCLA that there was only just one other Black student in all the chemical engineering doctoral program when I first started. Even my parents, when they came to drop me off, were pretty surprised when they saw the pictures of the candidates in the chemical engineering doctoral program and saw only one other Black person, and they expressed their concern to me. I was also disappointed that there was no other Black faculty as well. Additionally, I started my doctoral career in January as opposed to September, so I felt quite behind when in terms of meeting up and getting to know my cohort. So that felt hard for me to ingratiate myself in the community for my first year. In my first year, I was looking for a great community between other Black engineering students, but I was not able to find any. Unfortunately, it wasn't until after the tragic murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and others, when Dean Murphy gathered the Black engineering students to meet, that I was able to see and meet other engineering students that looked like me. It's unfortunate. I would say that it took a tragedy for us to all meet and get to know each other, but I definitely hope to do all I can to push to increase diversity in faculty and students and foster community for current and incoming Black engineering students. Thank you.
Thank you to the students for sharing their experiences. We will now hear from Dean Murphy, who will share her preliminary plans.
Good afternoon, everyone, for being here. Um, uh, I'm absolutely moved by everything I've heard, right? Thank you for sharing your stories with us. It's not easy. It's not easy putting yourself out there. And so I know it took a lot of bravery on your part. and I do thank you for it. It is not easy being the only one. It's not easy being the first. It's not easy representing, all Black people, carrying all that on your young shoulders. And I'm so sorry that you have to go through those things. I do think that we have to get those numbers moving. We can't accept those numbers anymore. We shouldn't have accepted them ever at all. And I promise you that we'll get working. I'm not interested in performative actions. I am an engineer. We want to get stuff done. And I think at the end of the day, I and my entire team will be judged on the things we do, not on the things that we say. So hold us accountable. Right now, I know that you sent us for demands, and I will go through those. We have time set aside for doing that. But we have been working on some ideas, before that letter came through. And I wanted to go over some of them. There is an overlap with some of the stuff that you all want. But some of them are different, and we have that discussion in terms of what you want and what we're thinking of and how to make all of this work. So let me go through this. I won't pop anything on the screen, but I do have my notes, and so I'll pick them up. So here's what we're thinking of, all right? And I've divided, our plan, our commitments into a number of different buckets. And the first of these buckets is resources, right? So what are we going to put into this to make these numbers move, to make life better for all our Black students? What I want to commit to is $10 million of endowment from existing school endowments towards scholarships, fellowships, and programmatic support for SEED. Right now, I want to explain a little bit, and I know you'll have a lot of questions, and I'd be happy to answer them. This is an endowment, all right? And what is an endowment? An endowment is really money that's going to be invested. It's going to be invested in the stock market or in the bank or wherever. The UCLA Foundation runs this. And the payout is really what is made available to be spent, right? Now, furthermore, the $10 million that we will use as an endowment will grow. It'll grow because of the market growth, and also because some of the payout from it keeps getting reinvested. The UCLA Foundation does that. What is the payout? The typical available payout is between 4 to 5% each year. Now, typically, these funds earn more than 4 to 5%, but whatever is excess of 4 to 5% typically gets plowed back into the principal, and it grows the endowment. Right now, the other thing I do want you to know is that we don't have all of these $10 million yet, right? So we've been doing a chunk of fundraising for the Centennial Campaign, and people have made a lot of pledges, gift pledges of all kinds, and these pledges are coming in, all right? And so most of the gift funds that I've been looking at will take about 10 years to pay out, right? So we don't have all $10 million, but the numbers are growing every year as our generous donors all pay into this. So it will take about 10 years for the $10 million to accumulate, but every year the numbers will keep growing. Right now, what is this worth at the end of the day? So at full realization, we will have a funding of 400 to 500K per year, right? So almost $500,000 a year as a payout from this endowment. Now, what does it mean, right? So the budget of SEED today, for example, is $1.3 million a year. So, $500,000 is a pretty big commitment, right? So that, I think it's a good chunk of money to have to run our programs. That's not the end of it. Now, in addition, we've been talking, our external affairs group has been confabulating about it, thinking about it. In fact, we just talked to them this afternoon at the end of their strategic planning process, and they will commit to raising an endowment for SEED. So we're looking for donors now. I've got meetings already set up. I'm talking to a number of people. And so in addition to this, we'll be looking for other endowment money, and we will be working to expand scholarships, fellowships, other kinds of programmatic support. Right now, this has already begun. I know our external affairs team has been talking to Kathy Douglas to define the need. They've had extended conversations with me. This is a strategic priority for them. They're on it. And so we're going to get working on it right away. Right now, in addition to these things, we are talking to our Dean's Corporate Advisory Board. The Corporate Advisory Board is really some of our largest employers. They are very interested in the question of expanding the diversity of our school, certainly expanding the number of Black students we have in our school, expand the pool from which we hire, and I mean, the pool from which we admit students. And they are, of course, very interested in hiring. And so they are willing to be very helpful as well. We've got a meeting set up with them in short order in August. Right, so that's one set of resources that we are planning to commit. Now, the other question is, of course, you brought this up as well, and that's the issue of faculty hiring. And you're absolutely right. All right, 2 Black faculty in the entire school is a very low number. However, you know, everything that we do, either in terms of resource commitment or in terms of hiring, we are constrained by California law and by federal law. I mean, Prop 209 is the law under which we currently function, right? So everything that we think of has to be compliant with the law. And you guys know this, right? So what we want to do on the faculty hiring front is to start what we're calling a mentor-professor program. Right? What is a mentor-professor program? Mentor-professor program is open to everybody, all right? But the intent here is to hire faculty who will support and nurture our Black and all our underrepresented students. Right? So what is a mentor-professor? How is this different from other kinds of hiring? So a mentor-professor is one who, in addition to being a top-notch researcher and a top-notch teacher, is dedicated to the mentoring of our underrepresented students. And this would be evidenced in the application in different ways. We'll be looking for activities such as supporting organizations such as SEED, such as NSBE, and others as well. Supporting undergraduate research programs for our Black and our underrepresented students, participating in organizations such as NSBE, you know, perhaps advising them. And this will be an ongoing program, right? So we will always have this running. Now, I have spoken to EVC Carter, and what she has done is she has committed to 3 school-wide searches this year, all right? So we will be starting in the 2021 season. And I do want to tell you, you know, how much of a commitment it is from the campus's side. This year, we're not allowed to hire anybody new at all because the budgetary situation due to COVID is so extreme. These are really the 3 only searches that the school is permitted to put forward this year. Right now, in addition to the 10 mil that we have committed, it would be important to emphasize that typical startup packages for faculty depends, of course, on what area they're hired in, but they go from $500,000 to $1 million per faculty member. So when we hire people, we're putting in very significant money behind them. Now, you know, there are pitfalls here, right? So, you know, because we are talking about mentor professors and people who are, you know, faculty who are interested in mentoring our underrepresented and our Black students, there's a very real chance that, you know, they will get overwhelmed with service requirements. But we will work to ensure that that does not happen, that their mentoring role counts as service and they will not be, you know, asked to do more than anybody else. You know, so that's what we're planning. Scott, you all know Professor Scott Brandenburg. He's our Associate Dean for EDI. Scott, you want to jump in and say anything more? Because you've been working on ads and other things as well.
Sure, I can say that the mentor professor program is not something that's new to UCLA. That Life Science has used this mentor professor program to hire quite a few people, including Tracy Johnson, who's now the dean there. So we brought in some real, star faculty through it. I'm excited to see it play out. I think it's a really good thing, and I'm really looking forward to working on that this coming academic year.
Yeah, and we're working on right now we're in the middle of figuring out how to put the ads out, what the processes are going to be. I do want to emphasize that this is school-wide, all right? So there is no particular area that we're looking in. It's not in a particular department. The 3 positions will be available to all departments in the school. They will each run their own searches, identify the best candidates, and the school-wide committee will pick 3 faculty. And so our intent is really to continue these searches if they happen to be unsuccessful. And I hope going forward, we will actually continue to keep this program open and continue to be filling these faculty positions. Right now, the other thing, we want to do a great deal to try and improve our undergraduate and our graduate student recruitment and retention. This is an interesting point in the life of the school, right? A lot is going to change this year. For example, with the UCs dropping the ACT and SAT scores, there's a chance to rethink admission policies entirely from ground up. There is a potential rescinding of Prop 209 in November. That opens up another whole different set of possibilities. And so I think it is time to actually start looking at what these changes really mean for our Black students and for our other students as well. Right. So, and many of you have spoken in previous meetings about a re-examination of GRE requirements. This conversation is already happening. In fact, Chemical and Biomolecular, I believe, has already voted to make GRE optional with language that's saying that if you don't submit a GRE score, it will not be a disadvantage. So that's already happened, and other departments are talking as well. I am very interested in developing a pool of diverse undergraduate students, and I want to be sure of 2 things. All right, I want to be sure that we get phenomenal students, who are well trained in math and science and everything else. And I want to be sure that the students that we're working with in high school actually come to UCLA. All right, those are the things that I would like to make happen. And so we're just now thinking about a multi-year weekend program run in schools that we would be working with that could build, a good pool of very well qualified students that we could pull into engineering. Right now, there could be pipeline programs through community colleges, but mainly I'm interested in approaches that are very scalable and which can bring significant numbers of students to our school. Right? There are similarly pipeline programs we would like to develop a pool of diverse graduate students, including our own undergraduates, but also connections to Cal States, our sister UCs, and to the HBCUs. So we are thinking about these things and want to develop funding pipelines for these kinds of programs as well. Right now, this is one of the things that you all asked for, but we've been thinking about it as well. Now, the school will be going through a strategic planning process this fall. EVC Carter wants us to submit those by mid-November. I will be setting up a standing committee on diversity by mid-August. And this will be a big leg of our strategic planning process for the school. And so we will be looking through admissions. I think SEED too as an organization is at an inflection point. It's had a change of leadership after 30 plus years. I think it is time for us to think through what SEED is, what its mission ought to be, what has it done well, what does it need to do better, who is it serving, Was it funded, and so on. So I think that should be a part of this, what the Standing Committee on Diversity does. And then, of course, all the kinds of pipeline and pool development and outreach programs that we've talked about, right? Space allocation policies and other things as well. So we'll talk more about this as we go on. But I would like the Standing Committee to have a life beyond the strategic planning process. And the Standing Committee could do a number of important things for the school. It could be tracking our delivery on our goals, all the things that we've set forward here. This committee could be reporting to the broader SAMUELI community in terms of what our success rates have been, what are we doing well, what are we doing badly, suggesting new programs and setting old ones, and so on. So this could be, the committee that keeps track of this entire thing and pushes us to meet our goals. It's always been a regret of mine that it took such a horrendous event for us to start talking like this. And I do think that we need to meet much more often. And I think we absolutely need to meet in settings where we can have frank and constructive conversations. So I want to meet quarterly with every one of you to hear your concerns and to report on progress. Right. So there are other things we can talk about, but this is what I want to put in front of you. I know you've got things that you've asked for particularly. You can see that there is some overlap on these things, but they're not identical. And so I'll stop talking now. I've probably gone longer than I thought I would. I do apologize. I'll stay as long as you guys want. So let me stop here, all right, and hand this off to you.
Thank you, Dean Murphy, for your remarks. It's very much appreciated. The students' leaders will now discuss the action items from their Juneteenth letter to SAMUELI leadership with the leadership team. As a reminder to the students, letter of the SAMUELI leadership can be found in the chat. The first action item will be discussed by Sydney Austin.
I just want to say thank you to Dean Murphy for being transparent with these plans, and I am really looking forward to continue working with you. So getting into our action items, the first action item sent in our letter to the SAMUELI leadership asks UCLA SAMUELI to fund initiatives that move forward equitable change. The specific actions we would like to see are as follows. First, we would like the school to provide funding for the recruitment and retention of Black undergraduate and graduate students, as well as postdocs, staff, and faculty. For this, we have suggested the establishment of a Black engineering office where staff are paid to develop and implement recruitment and retention programs, as well as address the needs of SAMUELI's Black community. Next, we want to see UCLA SAMUELI diversify its faculty. Currently, Black individuals represent 1% of the tenure-track engineering faculty at UCLA, and we want to see this number increase by 10% by 2030 in order to represent the demographics of the Los Angeles community, which UCLA is meant to serve. To this end, we suggest Black faculty be hired annually so that 5% of faculty are Black by 2023. We now open the floor to hear how the UCLA SAMUELI leadership plans to address these asks.
Thank you, Sydney. Thank you for reading out and presenting to us the first request you all made in your letter. Please know that we are fully supportive of your aspirations to improve representation. Your goal is my goal, right? Representation of Black students, of faculty and staff in our ranks. My one caveat would be that we do have to be compliant with state and federal law. And what that means is that I can't commit to this or that percentage on this or that schedule. I'm just not allowed to do that. But we are committed nevertheless to pushing forward in the directions that you want. Right? So we have made a commitment of $10 million to as an endowment, and we will commit to faculty startup packages And in the letter, you had asked for a commitment of 13 million out of gift funding. I promise you that everything that if we add it all up, our numbers will probably far exceed 13 million. Right now, we're also going to be raising, funding for endowed chairs, retention, and all of that. And so the school is prepared to make very significant commitments to you. But again, I want to say that I can't say that it will be X% by X date. Right? What I can promise you is it's full steam ahead. We will push right ahead, and you can hold our feet to the fire, and you can absolutely push us to do the maximum. I look forward to your pushing us to do the maximum. Right? Our mentor professor program, which I talked about, will help us with faculty diversity, and I believe that that's a very important contribution. Now, you did talk about an entity or a body that that is particularly meant for Black students and staffing and so on. Here, I think we do need to have a discussion. I am a huge fan of SEED. I'm very admiring of its historical role. I am in awe of all the things that organization has done. And I've always seen that as perhaps the body through which our Black students are represented. Though of course SEED is open to everybody, and so I want to understand through more intimate conversations what role has SEED played in the lives of our Black students. But I also want to say that leadership transition at SEED after a long, long time is an opportunity, all right? It is an opportunity to rethink what SEED should be. Should it be an umbrella organization with other organizations or subgroups under SEED that could work together? Could it be arranged in some other way? So these are things that we really do need to think about, and I would like to hear from you how you see how we could think about SEED going forward. Now, there are there are also questions then about what this kind of a body could do. Who does it serve? Does it serve students? Does it serve faculty? I think the students and faculty functions really do have to be different because faculty functions involve very elaborate tenure and other procedures. And so I would imagine that the Associate Dean of Students Office, run currently by Scott Brandenburg, would be the entity that ensures hiring, tenure, promotion, mentoring of our diverse faculty, our Black faculty, our underrepresented faculty. And these concerns are really very different from what students would typically want. In terms of a task force, we are, I would like to set up a standing committee on diversity, which has very much the structure, I think, the flavor that you may be talking about. And of course, our students will have representation there, and we will be accountable to our community through a task force. So I don't know if I've answered, everything that you brought up. I did have your question here and tried to answer it. Let me know if I have, right? So let me stop there.
Yes, thank you, Dean Murphy, for your response. I agree that SEED is an incredible organization, and I honestly think it played a major role in my ability to get through UCLA engineering. But unfortunately, it was with SEED being active that this was still allowed to happen, that we have so few Black engineering students. But I do think it is a very opportune time for change and moving forward and having that discussion. And in starting that discussion, I would like to ask a follow-up question that was given to me. So in the Chancellor's Rising to the Challenge letter, he addressed that there would be established 10 faculty lines that address for faculty that address issues of Black experience. So hiring faculty whose research deals with Black life, Black experience. And I was wondering if that is something that we could implement in the engineering school, opening faculty lines that deal with Black experience. That doesn't necessarily mean faculty that are hired have to be Black, but their research and possibly in civil engineering and dealing with like environmental racism deals with that. Or if we do have established a Black engineering office that is devoted to creating these retention and recruitment initiatives, that is something that has to deal with Black experience. So hiring people there, is that something that could be approached moving forward?
I would be excited about the idea of environmental justice plus civil engineering. I think that could be a pretty interesting area for us to plumb, and and we may be unique in that, and that would be a really cool thing. I should say that the faculty positions that we're putting forward here come from the school. They're not from the 10 that the chancellor put forth for the campus. That may be a small detail, it may not matter, or maybe we could actually take advantage of those positions as well. We do have, Scott Brandenburg happens to be a civil engineer. Scott, you want to jump in and say a few words about this?
Yeah, sure. I guess first, I meant to say the first time that I spoke, I just really want to thank all of the students for sharing your experiences. I know that Dean Murthy already thanked you for this, but I know it's not easy to share these cases of racial trauma that you've experienced. And I think a lot of people aren't aware that this is happening. So I just want to thank you for being vulnerable and sharing in this way. And I'm happy to be participating in this dialogue. A few things I'll add about the mentor professor program are that the title of the person, when we hire faculty, they come in as assistant professor, associate professor, or just professor, full professor. That's exactly the same as what will happen for the mentor professor. And so this is not like a separate type of professor or something like that. It's a regular ladder track, tenure track faculty member who we're hiring. It's just that part of their qualifications when we vet these candidates and decide who would be a good fit for our program and who do we want to bring in for an interview, part of their qualifications will be how well have they mentored Black students and underrepresented students. And so, when we read through their dossier, that's going to be a really prominent part of this particular set of 3 searches. Sydney, I also like the idea of studying, the intersection of racism in engineering, because there are, you mentioned environmental engineering. There are also issues of representation in data sets that make up that people use for machine learning algorithms. There's a whole host of issues that would be really interesting and potentially fruitful research topics in which we could bring people in. So I'd like to just thank you too, Sydney, for raising that question.
Yeah, no, I'm actually excited. I think this could be an interesting direction for the school. We ought to think it through as a part of our, we're thinking through the whole strategic planning process again. Who are we going to hire? What areas we're going to hire in? This is a very interesting axis, and particularly living in LA, I think the issue of environmental justice, etc., could be actually quite important. And the best thing about it, I think, is it allows us to connect up with the rest. That would be a very good outcome. Yeah, no, let's talk about it. I think this is very interesting.
Okay, thank you for your responses. I am also excited about moving forward with these initiatives. So one of the other follow-up questions that we had is, what do you all see the effect of the mentor professor program being on the climate of UCLA, and how do you hope it will improve diversity and make a safer climate potentially for Black students and underrepresented students?
I think, look, there's no question that having representation on the faculty is really the first step to increasing numbers. I mean, I don't think we can really move numbers as long as we look the way we do, right? And my hope really is that the mentor professor program will start providing a nucleus of faculty who can, so that students can see themselves in those faculty and have mentors and have people who understand their experience. I can only hope that that will improve our climate. I think it will make us all aware, much more aware, because we have people amongst us who, who have lived the experience. And so I think it's a really important thing. Now, I do know that this has been tried out in the life sciences. So, I don't know if Scott, you know more about how the program is played out in life sciences. I do know that they've been successful, and everybody I've ever talked to has talked about it as being a very positive influence. So I'm looking forward to jumping in and making it happen as soon.
Yeah, maybe I'll add a few things here as well. I agree that there's no doubt we need to improve representation of Black people among our faculty. But I think we have to have realistic expectations about the effect that will have on climate. That's definitely not the only thing that we need to change. Sydney, you were mentioning the awareness to action training, and I think that those kinds of trainings can go a long way toward helping with the climate. I think that we need to do a better job of reaching out and talking about these pretty uncomfortable things. A lot of talking about race and injustice makes people uncomfortable, but I think that if we're going to get better, people have to go through these uncomfortable conversations. And that's what programs like the awareness to action training are made to do. I mean, I would really like it if we could reach all of the students. We're working on making it, well, maybe I should explain what awareness to action is, because a lot of people online may have not heard of this before. So this is a program that we rolled out last fall. Brianne Branch took the lead in developing it, along with Audrey Poole O'Neill and myself and Jackson Fletcher in our We at UCLA office. And the program focused on the issue of gender bias within engineering, since it was through our Women in Engineering program. During the summer, we've been updating it to also include issues of race. And a lot of the underlying issues are the same. It's low representation, implicit bias, stereotype threat. There's a lot of issues that go along with this, and we're working on making it an online delivery now in this time of COVID. So I'm hoping we can reach a lot of students through this and maybe turn the tide and improve the climate through these sorts of programs. I would like to make it mandatory. I'm not sure we have the bandwidth to reach that many students yet. We're kind of in the rollout phase right now, but that's certainly something that we can continue talking about, how to scale it up and get the word out to more students. So the question of climate, I think, is really a great one, Sydney. So thanks for bringing that up.
Scott, I want to ask Rick Wessel to actually jump in about some of the stuff he's been doing with faculty teaching faculty and awareness in that group as well. Rick, you want to say a few things?
Sure. Actually, Scott has worked very closely with me on this. So we started a program about 3 years ago to try to teach our professors how to teach, because nobody actually did that. And we found out that the best, the teachers that they would listen to were senior faculty. So we started at what we call the Faculty Teaching Faculty program. And for a couple of years now, we've included in that climate/diversity training that Scott has been delivering, and while that we're certainly not reaching all the faculty, we do reach all of the new faculty, and we're starting to change the culture, I think, or we're starting to improve things. And as we learn about new, or as we become more aware of problems that we have, I think we're going to be able to improve that training, and we can expand the number of faculty that are attending. Actually, we're doing a special version of it over the summer to help train faculty to be better remote educators so that we can do better in fall. And the numbers have been fantastic. We've been getting between 30 and 60 professors attending weekly Zoom sessions on how to do remote learning. And as it turns out, this Tuesday, we are going to be presenting entirely about including in your lectures social context and technology and society issues and inclusiveness and diversity. And I just made a note to myself that the idea of if you are teaching a class that in practice requires students to come together, I noticed in the Q&A a really great comment about really you need to assign those teams, not let them form organically if what's happening is actually, that ends up kind of stacking the deck against someone who is by themselves in their representative group. So anyway, I just wanted to say that, we're not done. There's so much that we need to do. And I think that, it's really been moving for me to hear what the students have had to say. And so, I'm not trying to say, oh, we've got this solved, but I think that we are at a beginning. And the Faculty Teaching Faculty program is giving us a useful channel to start to deal with climate issues directly with the faculty. And Scott actually has done a great job of, kind of placing the message in the right context so that it gets through to the faculty. He's got some really great, I think I've talked too much, but I think it's a start. So thank you.
Yes, thank you all for your input, and I think this is a really good discussion, and I personally am very excited to see these programs moving forward and get a chance to work on them with you all. In the interest of time, I'm going to yield my time. We will be moving on to action item 2, which will be presented by Matthew McIntosh.
Hello again. I'm Matthew McIntosh, and I will be going over the second point that was made in the Juneteenth letter on how to make the hiring process more transparent and intentional. The first point I would like to highlight is the need for the university to implement sustained efforts to recruit and retain Black faculty. We would also like clarity on how the hiring committees are set up and to ensure that there is still Black representation on the committee. We would like to ensure this by ensuring that a Black graduate student and a Black staff or faculty member be on this committee. Next, we would also like to evaluate the effect of anti-Black racism on the tenure, promotion, and the annual review process of faculty by conducting and publishing an annual climate survey to assess progress towards anti-racism, diversity, and inclusion. Finally, we would like to know in more detail how the search committee identifies viable candidates and make a commitment to hire through more diverse pathways, such as the UC President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Program or other diversity inclusive programs.
Okay, so let me jump in and try and answer some of that. I don't know if I caught all the sub questions, so ask me again if I haven't covered everything that I want to cover here. So let's talk about the faculty hiring process and how you could participate in it. Basically the way the hiring committees are set up is that we can set up search committees with faculty in them, but the participation of students, graduate students, and so on would be a part of the interview process, right? little bit, I'm wondering how to make the search committee process work if there are students on it, because a lot of very sensitive stuff is accessed by the search committee. The reference letters and so on. There are very frank discussions about a person who may actually end up getting hired and may end up being a teacher. So I absolutely welcome, the participation of students in the search process. That is absolutely possible. You can certainly interview the people that we bring in. You can express strong opinions. You can say, we absolutely don't want this person. All of that is completely fine, all right? My main worry is really about how to actually put students on the search committee itself. We're prepared to be transparent. I mean, we're absolutely prepared to make available to you the names of our, the search committee members. We can't put these on websites and things because they end up getting calls from everybody and their brother, and they may even get harassed. But we can make it available certainly to our standing committee on diversity. Y'all can take a look at who's on these committees and satisfy yourselves that these are working well. Your letter to us, you didn't bring it up now, but your letter to us did talk about making the list of candidates available to you. And that would be difficult to do. We have candidates who are faculty members in other schools who are applying to our searches. They don't want to be made, they don't want their candidacies to be public. Even postdocs and PhD students don't want their names out there because they're looking for other jobs. They don't want, to say that they've been rejected or whatever. So those things, we can't do, but there are other things we can absolutely do to make sure that you are happy with transparency. Now, right now, the school already reports during the hiring process, right? Not at the end. I mean, as the process is evolving, we report a lot of data to the Vice Chancellor of EDI, right? So we tell them where the ads have been placed, talk about the diversity of the applicant pool with respect to the availability of candidates, the diversity of the shortlist with respect to the availability of candidates, diversity of candidates to whom the offers are made. All of this stuff is provided to Murphy Hall. And I'm pretty sure that if we went to look and check, we can probably provide you that information as well. Right? So the reservation is about particular names of candidates and so on. But statistical information about how searches are proceeding is entirely fair game, and we would be happy to provide that kind of information. Now, I don't remember all the pieces. Let me talk about the other one thing that you brought up, programs such as the Presidential Postdoctoral Program. You're absolutely right. I'm really grateful that UCOP has this program. It's a valuable program. We hired Professor T. Mughalian in civil engineering from that program. The program's great, and we will absolutely be looking at it and other similar programs. But we're going to have to do our job building pipelines and pools of candidates because, even though the postdoctoral program is great, it only, it puts out only about 5 engineering postdocs a year all across the 10 UCs. And we have to fight pretty hard to get these postdocs because everybody wants them. So there's work to be done, all right? No question about it. Now, I don't know if I answered everything here. Matthew, can you go ahead and tell me if I have, or is there stuff that I've left out?
Well, first, a couple things. First, I want to answer a question that we got from the chat. One question is, if there has already been student participation in the search committee for EDI and inclusion on other levels of the campus, would it be particularly difficult for it to implement in engineering, or is there different cases of things going on here?
No, I mean, I'd be happy to look and see how it was done in other places. So let's take a look at that. I think they were, I mean, at least our initial conversations amongst ourselves brought up a number of issues that people are very uncomfortable with, all right? So just the idea that you'd have a bunch of people saying things about a faculty member that could show up in the classroom that we hired. The discussions are very frank, not clear that the faculty members themselves would be comfortable once we hire them, they know what this process is. So there's a bunch of concerns around that, about putting people directly on putting students directly on the search committee. We would be happy to have representatives, faculty representatives on the search committee. I'd hate to overburden our own, we've got, 2 Black faculty members, that's all we have. So one idea might be that we would actually draw faculty from, other departments or other schools, other universities do that. And of course, there are people in our own school who are very sympathetic to expanding the diversity of our faculty, and they would be willing to serve. So, we could open this up in ways that would serve the purposes that you're really looking for. Right? And as I said, we're absolutely happy to report, absolutely happy to tell you how the searches are going, what the percentages are, where we've been successful, where we've been unsuccessful.
Okay, thank you, Murthy. I have one other question. This is more going along to the second bullet point here, in evaluating the efforts of anti-Black racism on the tenure, promotion, and annual review process. Well, it is good and all that we're here talking about these issues and we want to make change. How will you be able to hold these faculty and staff accountable for ensuring that this goes on in the future and not that we have a relapse and return to where we are today?
Meaning that the processes are carried on into the future, you mean?
Yes, correct.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a good question, right? And it's something that I do have to think about. I'm not going to be dean forever, and things change, etc. So things can change, all right? So I think the one insurance is to codify these into the culture, all right? I mean, we do a lot of things today, which are cultural, right? It's a part of the culture of the school. And I think these things have to become a part of the culture of the school. So the thing that we have to think about is, what do we do? What do we do in the school? What do we do in the departments that codifies these practices? I mean, there are many, many academic practices that are codified into the culture, and that's the reason that they happen. So I don't have sort of a facile answer for you right off the top of my head. I think we're going to have to think carefully about how to make things permanent, how to internalize processes and make things permanent going into the future. So don't have a pat answer, right? It's something that I have to think about.
Okay, one further question. So I know you already outlined in your proposal about the hiring of 3 ideally mentor professor personnel to be hired in the near future. One thing that I was asked was that how would you, it's always one thing to be able to say, oh, we want to have these people to be able to help our young Black students, help our young underrepresented students, but then they can say they have time constraints, they have financial constraints, they have other constraints which forces them more towards research in a way to doing the EDI work. How can you make this a priority for these new incoming professors?
I mean, I think what they do would need to be a part of the service expectation for the school, right? So what we have in the tenure process is really an expectation for 3 things. There's research, there's teaching, and there's service. It is true that nobody gives you a Nobel Prize for service. You might get a Nobel Prize for research. But there are expectations, all right? And every letter that I write in support of tenure, and rarely once in a while against it, but hardly ever, we do call out the service component of what these faculty are doing. And the higher up the ladder you go, the more extensive are the service components, right? So we call these out. So it could be part of that process. We explicitly call out service contributions in tenure and promotion and merits and advancements. And develop a culture of taking these things seriously, not just for mentor professors, but really for everybody. I mean, we are a shared governance institution, so service is really an important part of the way that people are evaluated. I mean, it should be more important because it is really such a part of the culture. We'd want to absorb that into into that tenure and promotion process. Now, outside of the tenure and promotion process, I've been trying to recognize service, service to the school, service to the university through awards for our faculty. We set up a major award after I got to UCLA. Maybe there's, recognitions of that kind that could also be woven into the thing. But I'll also tell you this, all right? A lot of it is going to depend on who we hire, of hiring people who have a commitment to the cause. I mean, that they will want to do it, and those are the people that we be looking for. Right? I mean, it's a part of their conception of themselves and the evolution of their own work and their own life. That's the biggest insurance to make sure that it actually happens.
Okay, well, thank you, Dean Murthy, for that inspiring conversation. In the interest of time, I'd like to yield the rest of my time so we can move on to Imani, who can now elaborate more on point 3 in the letter.
Thank you, Matt. Matt, you're still not muted. Thank you. Before I start, I wanted to address in the chat, there were some questions about what SEED stands for. SEED is the Center for Excellence in Engineering and Diversity, and is a department at UCLA which is committed to the development, recruitment, retention, and graduation of underrepresented engineering students. So when you hear that, that's what we're referring to. Okay, so I am addressing action item 3 from our letter, which was asking for the UCLA Samueli leadership to provide a dedicated space for Black engineering students. The need is a Black student meeting space, and our reasoning was that for too long, the Black engineering community, as you could tell from the numbers that Sydney presented at the beginning, has been small and scattered, which has created a lack of connection. And on top of our daily encounters with systemic and institutional racism, it diminishes our mental and academic well-being. As such, we would like a space that would serve as a safe space for Black students. This space would also promote the academic stability, emotional security, and mental wellness of Black engineering students so that they can make it to graduation. My question for you, Dean Murthy, is this part of your plan? And how does your plan address the need for a safe space for Black engineering students?
Thank you for that, Imani. As someone who graduated spectacularly, I'm pretty sure that you've got no issues with graduation. Thank you. I understand the need for spaces in which you can feel comfortable and connect to each other and talk freely and put your feet up, do whatever it is that you want to do as a community. Right? I get that. I think that's important. I haven't thought this through completely because there are a number of issues around this that I need to sort out, right? So I will take this under advisement and I will consider it very, very seriously. Let me tell you why I can't just say yes today, right? There are a number of issues that I'm going to ask our Standing Committee on Diversity to sit down and pull apart and sort out. One is, I need to understand from you what it means when you say that you would like a safe space, right? I know the campus has set up a Black Students Resource Center. Clearly, there's an example there where Black students can feel connected to that resource center. There's going to be resources provided. Again, I keep coming back to Prop 209. I hate to keep sort of harping on it, but it is the life that we lead. Prop 209 doesn't allow us to say that this space belongs to this ethnic group or that gender or anything like that, right? And the way we set spaces, we provide spaces, say for we at UCLA or the Black Students Resource Center, is that these things are open to everybody. In principle, anybody can come in, right? And that's what makes it legal. So I need to understand when you say safe space, what do we mean? I mean, are you free in principle to let anybody in? Are there restrictions? How will we work with this to make it legal as the first order of business that you got to figure out? Maybe you already have an answer for me, but fine, I'm just sort of putting it out there for you to consider. Right now, the other thing that I am struggling with is what policy should govern the allocation of such spaces, right? Because Black students are one group. We have other identity groups. Who qualifies, right? If today somebody else comes and asks me for such a space, what are the principles by which we might say yes or no? I think it's important for us to establish those principles because sooner or later that's going to come up, and I'm going to have to address it. So the answer is not a no. I just need somebody to sit down and think it through fully, right? And then ultimately we need to figure out how much space, where, what kind of space, what needs to be done. The space situation of school is very tight, so we've got to think through all of the implications downstream of that, right? So that's what I want to put in front of you, Imani. I mean, I need to understand what this is and how to figure it out. Now, one way to do it is, as I said, to put this in front of our standing committee. We'll be setting it up pretty soon because I got to get jumping on the whole strategic plan anyway, mid-August or so. And I was going to ask them to give me a recommendation on a bunch of different things by mid-October so it can be folded into our planning. So if that's the kind of thing that is agreeable to you, we could head off in that direction and try and figure this whole thing out. Right? What I'm saying is that I intend to act. I want to act. I just need to figure this thing out. The other thing that came up in the letter that you guys wrote is you need keys separately for NSBE Solar Spaces. Yeah, you got them. I can't understand why you're juggling one key between all of you. Happy to arrange that. That's we'll do.
Thank you so much, Dean Murthy. I do not want to speak on behalf of all of the Black engineering students as to why we need this space, but I do want to share for both our audience as well as you that part of the reason that this issue was brought up was that I've experienced and some of my peers have experienced being in the engineering buildings late at night and being asked why we're still there, what is our purpose. And so I think part of the reason, and I'm not saying it's the complete answer, is that we have been, as Black engineering students, harassed in these spaces and asked why we're there. But I'm sorry?
Is that correct? And who asks you? Is it custodial people or what happens?
Actually, it's usually not custodial people. They are usually the people that are waving at us. We kind of, at least me personally, I've built rapport with them. It's been from other students. I think when I was an undergrad, it was usually from PhD students that were in the space or leaving their offices. But thank you so much for your words. I do want to ask just one other question. And in the meantime, so while this space is being determined, what can each department do, or what will each department do rather, to create and support safe spaces for their students? Because that, I think, is something that can be done regardless of a physical space.
So what are you looking for there? I mean, looking for a space to sit in the different departments, or I guess I need to understand what you're asking.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. I think part of what that safe space means is that when we look at stories like Sydney's, where a professor maybe inadvertently didn't realize what they were saying was harmful, what can departments do, or what will departments do to make the culture feel inclusive so that it's not, we don't feel like we're asking stupid questions or that someone else, another student, their culture is valued more than ours?
No, yeah, a fair question. So you don't mean actually a physical space, but really a culture thing, right? Okay, so let me throw this to one of our folks from the departments. Maybe have Scott jump in and then maybe see if any of the department chairs want to jump in. Scott, do you want to say anything, or else I'll...
Yeah, Imani, I thank you a lot for raising the point. I can really also see the need for this kind of space for students to get together. That became really clear to me after the Zoom event in June, which I think was the first time the school had taken effort to bring together its Black students. And so it became really clear to me that there's value in having that community. In terms of what departments can do specifically to facilitate this culture, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think that there are faculty who would be happy to listen. I would be happy to listen. I mean, my door is open. Students can come and talk to me anytime. And, you know, I mean, I can be a confidential resource up to a point, but I can explain. We do have reporting requirements for cases, certain cases that are, you know, we can't be confidential resources all the time. And I think other faculty would have that same mentality. I know it might be hard though if you're a student and you're going through maybe a professor treated you badly, like the story that Sydney shared. That can be a really challenging thing to communicate to another professor, right? Because that, you know, I don't know, I can see that would be a challenge. So are there other things we can do to make students have a space where they can come together and just talk through some of this stuff? I think it's a great question. I don't know if I have the perfect answer right now, but it's something that I'll give some thought to, and I think it'll be on the agenda for this diversity task force that we're forming. And so it's a point well taken. Thank you.
No, let me sort of jump in and say something here, right? And, you know, happy to have anybody from the departments jump in. The kind of thing that I've seen work well with our deans group, you know, you know, all the deans, all the engineering deans have a group called the Engineering Deans Institute. And we've been doing, you know, some things to increase awareness, you know, in our own group. One thing that I've seen that really works is we had an acting troupe that actually comes in, works out scenarios exactly, for example, like the kind of thing that Sydney was talking about, right? You have a prof, you've got students, one student's being ignored, the other student's being addressed, you know, things like this. They talk about tenure promotion processes, they talk about graduate student advising, and it's really an act, all right? So the students, you know, they have actors actually work out, you know, play out certain scenarios, and then there's a discussion. And what I liked about it is it's not training, all right? It's not clicking some, you know, some training thing that somebody put on your computer, but sort of engaging you in a human situation, which I really, really like, right? So it's not expensive. I checked it out. We've done it with our engineering deans. You know, maybe something like that, you know, pushed out to our departments or done in a common, you know, faculty meeting of some kind every so often could be quite effective. I mean, it really moved me when I first saw it. You know, it sort of hits you because it's not reaching, right? You're sort of watching a situation play out. I don't know, Tim Fisher, do you want to say anything? Big mechanical engineering department.
Sure, I'm here. I can't turn my camera on. I mean,
Just as well, Tim.
I know, believe me. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. You're way better dressed in your photograph than in real life, probably.
Oh wait, no, I've been allowed. Here we go. Okay, so here I am. One of the things I want to mention on this point is, you know, certainly it's going to be a process, and something that happened recently. I don't think students know about it. Is that I think it was last year. Faculty who are all faculty are regularly reviewed. It's a unique characteristic of the University of California system. It's every 2 or 3 years. And now we have a diversity and climate, contributions to diversity and climate as part of our promotion and tenure and step advancement merit processes. So the faculty only just within the last year have started to actually think about what they're going to put into their dossiers. And we talk about it in our faculty meetings, and we talk about it in the hallways. And it's just to start, though. I don't want you to think that, you know, that's, you know, because that's there, it's going to work. But now there is something there, and we can now look to ways, you know, unique. I think we have to be creative, and we have to be persistent to solve these problems, and that's in place now.
Do you talk about these things in faculty meetings, Tim? Is this a
We have had
come up?
We've talked about it in a couple faculty meetings as the changes were coming about, and then I've talked about with many of our faculty members as they were preparing their dossiers.
No, but generally the questions of inclusion and questions of diversity, this conversation that we're having here, I think
Right.
would be good to bring it all up.
Right. And I would just add one thing to an earlier part of the meeting is that we do have required training for all faculty members who serve on search committees. So if a faculty member is to be named to a search committee, they have to have completed diversity, equity, and inclusion training within the last 2 or 3 years, and then they have to re-up that. That's something that's fairly recent, but I think that started before I moved to UCLA.
Thank you so much. Before I yield my time, and thank you so much, Dean Murthy, Dean Brandenburg, and Dr. Fisher for taking the time to respond to my questions. Before I yield my time and we move to the next agenda item, I saw a few questions in the chat. So I'm going to clarify on what I mean by a safe space. A safe space for Black engineering students means a space where you are no longer questioned or feel like people are questioning your presence in a space. A safe space is a place where you can act the way that you normally do without having to worry about what is so-and-so thinking about me? Is this person going to call campus security on me? That's my definition of safe space. And again, this safe space is supposed to promote mental stability as well as academic stability. The other questions that were brought up was someone said, if a professor is saying something harmful to Black students, can I clarify how a Black center will resolve this? It takes, as I said in the beginning of this meeting, it takes a lot of bravery to be in these spaces. And it's honestly very scary to confront people to their face about issues related to that you find as offensive. And so a Black center, and we've formed this just in our own community, but a Black center would allow a student to go into that space with students like them, share their experience, and potentially get advice and mentorship from their peers who have dealt with the same situation. So that is why a Black center will in some ways resolve this. I think, like Dean Murthy and Dr. Brandenburg said, and Dr. Fisher, the faculty having those trainings will also kind of limit it, but as we've seen with our student experiences, that's not the case. And then the last part, before I yield my time, because I know I went over, someone said, I think it is normal for any PhD student to ask students in a caring way why they are still on campus late at night, even just out of care and being curious what you are working on. I think, and in my personal experience, it hasn't been out of care, the asking questions. And what I've noticed, and it's really funny, is you'll be in a hallway and somebody will be in front of you. They'll walk right past the door, past the PhD student that's coming out. That PhD student will not say a word to that student that looks like them. But when I walk by, it's, hey, what are you doing here? Or, they're kind of watching me as I turn the hallway. And so for that reason, I bring this up. I think what we're going to need is training for both students and faculty, because we might not know that the way that we say things or our actions come off in a very biased way. And I think that's part of what we hope this town hall will begin to address. So with that, I just wanted to
One question, one minute before you. So it sounds like you're not thinking about an exclusionary space, right? You're not saying, no, you gotta be Black before you can cross this threshold. That's not what you're saying, really. Is that right? I mean, from a legal viewpoint, this matters.
That's correct. I think the intent, in the same way that, there are programs that recruit and mentor specific groups of people, in the same way, this space would primarily serve the purpose of allowing Black students to feel safe. But in no way, we understand that there is legislation in place, but we also know that some legislation may overturn 209, fingers crossed.
Mhm.
But we totally understand and are not saying this space is only for Black students, but there's no space at all right now that exists where we can go and do those things, where we can talk to our peers. It'll be a text conversation that's like, hey, this just happened to me. And you're kind of like, I'm in class, I can't help you right now. So having that space is kind of what we're trying to say. And I think in future discussions, we can definitely hammer that out and make it, like you said, more inclusive or not exclusionary. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to turn it over. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to our final action item point, which will be presented by Alexander Johnson, AJ. Thank you, everyone.
So our final action item is to make the engineering website more accessible to incoming Black students, to make it apparent to Black applicants from the website that they're welcome here, to use pictures that showcase the diversity of the student body or the lack thereof, to put resources for Black students, faculty, and staff on the website, and to include a diversity statement front and center on the website. So to put this into context, like the first thing people see when they're applying to UCLA is the engineering website, that they're applying to the engineering school. And currently, if you go on it, you'll see like 2 pictures of Black people and they're both Amani and not very much welcoming us here. So how would you advertise UCLA to people looking to apply, given the numbers and the experiences we shared today?
Yeah, no, fair question. And, when I got your letter, I got to looking at our website too, and it's almost pretty much the first thing I did. And so did our communications team, by the way. Christine Whaley Lee is not here on the panel, but she is in the audience, so she's listening to this. And you're right. All right. I mean, when you go take a look at it, there's not much there that could draw Black students to have them to be drawn to UCLA in any way, and also to our underrepresented students. And so, we've been adding material. In fact, if you keep track of our website, you'll see it evolving even, as we speak. I mean, they've been working on it even during the last week, and it'll continue to be worked on. So we'll work with you. We'll work with NSBE. We'll work with any of the students who want to work with us to see whether what we're putting together works for you, whether there's other information you need, scholarship information, fellowship information, other resources. And so, yeah, so this is an easy one to agree to. I mean, this is something we have to do, and I promise you that we're going to do it.
Okay, in the interest of time, I will turn it over to Kathy Douglas for our next segment.
Thank you, AJ. Thank you to everyone for this discussion. We will now take just the next 30 minutes to open the conversation to the questions that have been coming through the Q&A feature. As a reminder to the audience, you can submit questions through the Q&A function anonymously. We may not be able to get to everyone's questions tonight, but we will save them and send out a follow-up FAQ. Daniel Ferguson, the president of the UCLA chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers, will now pose the questions.
Good evening, everyone. So as Kathy mentioned, my name is Daniel Ferguson, and I'm a rising senior in the electrical engineering program. I'm the incoming president of the UCLA NSBE chapter. And also, like Kathy said, I just want to thank all the participants for their questions. As I guess we can see, there are so many questions, and I really appreciate that. It shows how concerned everyone is about these topics. And unfortunately, we will not be able to get through all of them today. So I'll go ahead and start with the first question. Proposition 209 is on the ballot in November. Is the Samuel Lee School of Engineering leadership aware of how this changes things exactly? If not, why not? And if so, have they started creating a plan to be implemented if the proposition is repealed? Will students and faculty be a part of the creation of said plan?
Okay, so I am told by our legal eagles that I cannot take a political stand on Prop 209 because it's already, I believe it's whatever, Proposition 18 or something on the ballot. And as a state employee, I can jump in and take sides on that. All right, so that's, I'm just putting it out there. But have you been thinking about what programs need to be created and so on? Yeah, of course, we're going to be thinking about what the contingencies could be, what changes needed to happen. Our strategic planning will need to think through a lot of different consequences because November is coming. Well, November 3rd is coming fast, of course, but even more importantly, our admission deadlines are end of November. All right, so we don't have a whole lot of time to think through what the fallout from one or the other scenario could be. And yes, we're going to work it out. It is my intention to involve you all in this discussion. It's quite complicated. Proposition 209 is one part of the mixture. There's other parts to the mixture, right? The dropping of ACT and SAT requirements is another big part because, how do you account for I understand that ACT and SAT have lots of issues with them, particularly the correlation with socioeconomic status and so on. But it's a measure we've been using for a long time, and if that measure is no longer there, how do we do admissions, right? What are our criteria? How do we allow? How do we take students? How do we reject students? These are things that are radically different from what they were last year. So we've got a big change coming, and I assure you that it's a part of our strategic planning process to think through what the consequences are for either the passage or the non-passage of Prop 209 and or Prop 18, and also how to deal with admission requirements that are really quite different. These are profound changes for our school. We're going to have to hash it out. You will absolutely have a say in the way we're going to proceed.
Thank you, Dean Murthy, for that answer. I'm sure all the other students, as well as myself, I'm looking forward to working with you on these plans. I'll go ahead and move to the second question now. Are there many qualified Black identifying students, grad students, and faculty candidates that apply when compared to other backgrounds?
I'll confess that the pipeline is small, right? There's no question about that. We tried, but we haven't been successful, not been very successful clearly. But I will tell you that one of the programs that we tried out last year, we started last year, and that's kind of begun to be successful. And this is really our future faculty program that we started a year and a half ago. And the guy that put it together is actually Scott Brandenburg. And this year, we hired the first faculty member under that program, Professor Brett Lopez, who actually came to us under that program, but he interviewed and we made him an offer. Thrilled that he's accepted. He will be here, I believe, next year. He's just completing his postdoc. So yes, so absolutely. If you just sort of throw it out there, the numbers are hard to create. The pipelines are not. The pool isn't there in sufficient quantity. It's a small pool, but we've gotten. We're trying. Sorry, we're trying to get creative. Scott, you want to say a little bit about the future faculty program?
Actually, could I jump in here for just 1 second? I have seen this question posed quite a few times in the chat and through our registration process. And it was just something that really got me thinking and something that I wanted to talk about and was hoping would be asked here today. Because I really think this type of thinking when we are talking about what a qualified student is, can become a severe detriment when we're talking about recruitment and retention for Black students. Because it's no secret that many Black students attend underserved schools due to the systemic racism in this country. And I think it is really unfair to stand by and say that Black students may not be qualified. I'm not saying that you're saying this, Dean Murphy, but just addressing how this question was phrased. I just want to point out that many of these students are very smart and hardworking and incredibly capable of being successful engineering students at UCLA. But the fact is they have the ability but lack the content. And that's why I really want to see the Sam Wiley School dedicate staff and programming to address this issue, as we were talking about the Black Engineering Office earlier. Because we currently have, a wonderful program with SEED that works with pre-college initiatives and students from underserved schools. However, despite their best efforts, the current programming does not adequately address the remediation in math that most of these students need. And there is no other UCLA Sam Wiley office at the moment dedicated to addressing this issue. So as a result, many of these initiatives that SEED puts forth rely on student effort. So us Black students who are already dealing with the pressures of being full-time engineering students while battling the added stresses of dealing with racism and prejudice and the imposter syndrome that we feel, we're now asked to help create this pipeline. And we're asked to go to these underserved schools and tutor these students when these students need more than tutoring. They need sustained mathematics education. And so part of that Black Engineering Office that we were speaking about earlier would make it UCLA Sam Wiley's job to be devoted to helping Black communities eliminate the math and science deficiencies that make these numbers as low as they are. Because I feel like we can't continue to turn a blind eye to these systematic inequalities that Black students, that leave Black students behind, and then say that they aren't qualified enough or that we're looking for the most qualified candidates. So again, Dean Murphy, I'm not saying that this is your mindset at all. It's just a question I've seen phrased multiple times, and I really wanted to address the way that it's been stated and put forth.
Very, very, very good point. All right. First off, I wasn't actually even talking about students. I was talking about how narrow the pool is for faculty candidates, and it doesn't even have to do with qualified faculty candidates. All right. So qualification is really not really even the issue. And Sydney made some very, very good points with respect to students and creating a pool of students that we want to bring into UCLA San Diego. And you're absolutely right. I mean, there are huge resource inequalities among our Black communities and among our underrepresented minority communities. And, students who are perfectly bright and perfectly capable, don't necessarily get the math and science that they need in under-resourced communities, which is why we've been talking about multi-year programs, right? I mean, and I agree with you, this is not a volunteer thing. I mean, this, you guys are busy, you've got school, you've got other lives to lead. It's not your job to fix, the shortcomings of this or that school system. I mean, that's not your job, your students. I think a well-funded, well-staffed, well-resourced program is needed, run by professionals to do these things. I mean, this is not a volunteer position. I agree with you there.
Right. Thank you, Dean Murphy, for that response. And also thank you, Sydney, for that important clarification. I'm going to move on to question 3 now. Will you ask faculty to or recognize faculty who adapt their curriculum to promote anti-racism? It's not just about interpersonal interactions. There can also be issues within the curriculum itself that can be addressed.
Okay, so I don't know enough about this to give you a facile answer. Yes, I'd like to understand more, right? I mean, presumably there are, structural things in engineering that we do need to look at. I confess to not knowing enough yet, what the question means. So I will think about it and I'll talk to people and try and figure out what you're saying. Of course, if there is, work to be done to fix these things, yes, this work would need to be recognized.
Thank you, Dean Murthy, for that answer. We look forward to working with you more in upcoming meetings to look at the issue of curriculum. On to the next question. If SEED currently has a budget of 1.3 million, will the endowment return push the allocation up to 1.8 million, or will it mean that the 1.3 million will be sourced from the endowment instead of where it's coming from now?
No, our intent is to, as far as possible, expand resources, right? That's what we're raising money for. Now, of course, SEED does a lot of hard work raising its own resources too, right? It's writing proposals, it's trying to raise money of its own. The thing that I want to do is to bring SEED closer to the engineering school. And Kathy's doing this already, all right? I want SEED to be working with our fundraising operation. We've got a very good fundraising crew. SEED shouldn't have to run around and do this on its own. And we will work with SEED to put forth proposals and ideas to our donors to expand the funding basis that they have, right? And to make them financially secure. That's really important. So no, the intent is that this is additional. It's not, SEED will raise the money that it needs. We will write an SF proposal. We'll do all the things that we do now. But in addition to that, there will be this, when they're done paying, when the 10 million is in, it isn't in right now, but it will build. But once that's done, yeah, there'll be $500,000 coming in.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Dean Murthy. Moving on to the next question. Since we are talking about making the faculty hiring process more transparent, is it possible to make the undergraduate and graduate admissions process more transparent, especially with regards to racial profiling?
I mean, we can, I'm pretty sure that we can make statistics available. I mean, those are public anyway, and we publish them every year. And the data that you all got from ASEE is provided by us, right? We report our numbers every year. And of course, we publish data on who applied, who was admitted, what the yield was, what the selectivity was. These things are all public right now anyway. And if you want us to report it to you in some way, we can certainly do that. Is there something else you were looking for? I mean, some other kind of transparency or what?
I'm not entirely sure from the question, but I'm sure we can talk amongst ourselves and figure out that if you reporting the statistics to us is not enough, what we can ask of you to make the process more transparent in this regard.
Let me ask Rick Wessel to jump in because he kind of runs our entire admission process anyway. So Rick, do you have something to add?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to make a couple of points. First of all, it seems like the question is concerned about racial profiling or discrimination in the admissions process. And just like Proposition 209 doesn't allow us to admit a certain race favorably, it also doesn't allow the discrimination in the other direction. And a primary, perhaps the primary aspect of the admissions process is the holistic review. In that holistic review process, the applicant's race is not part of the application. That's just not information given to the reader. So, because that would be a violation. So, so I guess that's one thing I would say. The other thing I would say is, earlier in the conversation, there was a discussion about how there's an issue with students who may have performed well in their local context, but be lacking in particular content. And I'm alive to those issues, but I wanted to point out there is a positive part of the UCLA admission system with respect to that admissions decisions or evaluation is done of achievement in the context of opportunity. In other words, a student who has done very well in a very difficult situation, even if they're, in some sense, the amount of content they have learned may not be the same, then that person still might be ranked very highly in the holistic process. And I have definitely seen that happen. But the other side of that, the actual content level, in order to succeed in engineering, there is some content that is needed. And we all know that. So I think that the things that Dean Murphy has already mentioned, so as you know, Kathy Douglas has a tremendous outreach operation, K through 12. There's also a lot of K through 12 outreach that's going on through our student organizations. But those two operations have not been, they're kind of siloed, so they haven't been unified. And I think, Dean Murphy's talked about, and it's exciting for us to think about unifying and expanding that activity, because I do think, and we can focus on neighborhoods or communities where it could really make a difference. I think that's a really fruitful direction for us to think about in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for that response, Dean Russell. Do you have anything to add, Dean Murthy, or should I move on to the next question?
Let's take another question.
Okay, so on to the next question. How is the Diversity and Inclusion Committee being put together? Although the UCLA engineering body is unique, it is not alone in its challenges with meeting the needs of underrepresented people in engineering as a whole. Could it be of the benefit to the committee to consult other UCs or professionals in industry?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we need to do. I do need to move on it quickly, though. I mean, it's got to happen this month, or else we just won't get our work done. I am thinking that it'll be a mixture of people, certainly faculty and certainly graduate and perhaps undergraduate students, perhaps a staff person in there as well. And we'll see if we need to include somebody from a different school to give a different perspective or something like that. I will talk to my fellow deans, all right? I mean, because everybody's sort of grappling with the same kinds of issues. So we'll talk to my fellow UC deans at Berkeley and at UC San Diego to see if there are ideas there. And if you've got ideas, if you've got ideas on how a committee like this could be constituted, that would be important. It is a standing committee, all right? So it's got it's going to be there in perpetuity. And so maybe somebody from our student leadership would be the people that are a part of this. So we get to know you, you get to know us, you know what we're doing. Those could be ideas that we forward. But I'd love to hear from you. I mean, if you have some things that you think happen, some people or some characteristics that have to be a part of this committee, I'd love to hear from you. I will figure this out in about 2 weeks. That's my hope. By middle of August, I hope to have some idea of the kind of composition. If you have nominations to make, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know. Let me know what you think.
Thank you, Dean Murthy. We look forward to working with you on that. So on to the next question. In terms of hiring faculty, does the Samuel Lee School of Engineering hiring committee have specific goals to combat the systematic racism in academia? For example, there's evidence that Black PhD students are undercited compared to white PhD students with similar results in economics and history, etc., which must affect the evaluation process for new faculty.
Again, this is a big question. I don't want to give you, really facile and quick answer, right? I have to think about how to do this. It's not easy, and things that you're talking about are very complicated. So let me beg off, all right? I'm not going to give you a lightweight answer that just I need to think. I need to think about how something that is so deep and systemic can be addressed institutionally by someone like me. That needs more thought and more reading and thinking than I have done so far.
Thank you for the response, Dean Murphy. I hope that we'll be able to dig deeper into this issue and come up with a solution. So on to the next and unfortunately last question due to time constraints. Just to clarify, will any of this 10 million endowment function similarly to the Cota Robles in helping Black students who may face financial barriers and did not receive that fellowship or something similar?
It can be used for scholarships and fellowships. I mean, the payout, right? So let's be clear, we never eat the seed corn, right? I mean, so the 10 million stays in the bank or it stays invested. The payout from the 10 million is what gets used for our purposes, right? And so that can be scholarships, it can be fellowships, it can be programmatic support, the cost of running programs. It can even be salaries, right? So it's pretty broad. Can it make up for not getting a quota Robles? Yeah, it could presumably do that. Now, again, Prop 209, I can tell you that it can only go to Black students. That's not what I can do. But it can broadly support the area of diversity. The gift agreements actually do support that. Right? So yeah, potentially it could.
Great, thank you for that response, Dean Murphy. We'll now move on to the next section of this town hall. Okay, so moving forward, we just like to establish some next steps that can help in the collaborative effort that we're trying to aspire to here. So I know, Dean Murphy, you mentioned that you would like to do quarterly meetings. We would like to suggest that we have monthly update meetings between our task force and your office, and that we can go back and forth and get feedback on some of the initiatives that you have mentioned and things that we would like to put into place. In addition to these meetings, we would also like your office's help in bridging efforts between existing infrastructure. For example, establishing a mixer with the Black engineering students that have been admitted during the African Student Union Admit Weekend. Also, extra help in terms of volunteering to recruit local Black high school students through the SEED pre-college programming, and also collaboration between the Black Graduate Student Association and SEED to recruit Black graduate students. And some examples we've listed are from NSBE conferences or UCLA summer research programs.
Daniel, would you be so kind as to send me the slide, please?
Yeah, we can definitely make that available. And now, in closing, I would just like to thank all the attendees of today's webinar and all those who have shown support to our cause throughout this whole planning process. I would also like to thank the administrative staff and faculty of the engineering school for their willingness to work with us. I also would especially want to express my sincere gratitude to all the students and staff members who've taken the initiative to fight for change, and without them, this entire thing would not have been possible. I'm really happy to see that we've been able to start this process and create a more equitable and comfortable environment for our Black students. My hope is that we can continue to meet and follow up on some of the initiatives that have been mentioned today, and we can begin starting some of these things. And I also look forward to more students and faculty members joining the conversations as we work to foster an open and more collaborative approach to growth. Thank you all.
Can I say a few words? I want to say how grateful I am for this meeting, for the large audience. I mean, you've stayed here for 2 hours. That's phenomenal. So you must really care about this. And I gotta say, I'm coming away from this strangely hopeful and really excited, right? And I'm determined that we will change things. I don't want to see these numbers. We're going to fix this stuff. We are determined to act. We want you to be happy, and we want you to be comfortable and successful in our school. And nothing would give me more pleasure than to make sure that that happens. So thank you all. Thank you all, and good night. Stay safe.
Thank you, Dean Murphy. I'd like to add that I'm also very hopeful after hearing the remarks and the discussion today. And I think that we have decided upon, or at least begun thinking about, real actionable changes moving forward. And I'm very excited to continue this work. This PowerPoint, and we have recorded this meeting, and we will make that video available online at a later date so we can go back and look at this. And we know we did not hit on all of the questions tonight, but we are saving those questions and comments, and we'll make them available at a later date as well, so we can continue this discussion in future meetings. And I speak on behalf of myself and the other students here when I thank you for your time, Dean Murphy, and thank you for answering our questions and having this discussion with us. And we are all excited, looking forward. We are all excited to move forward with you on these plans. And thank you to the entire Samueli leadership for being here once again. And with that, I think this town hall comes to a close.
Good night, everyone.